Chapter 385, Running into Master God Diviner. After arriving in the North District, Bai Xiaochun rented another spirit abode. He also spent some merit points to get some food, and then sat down and focused on cultivation for a few days until the commotion in the city died down. Now that he was at the very source of the heaven-span river, he could continuously work on his frigid school will evolving incantation, as long as he had enough food to make up for the energy drainage. The energy of heaven and earth in the area was majestic beyond description, and ensured that his cultivation was advancing by leaps and bounds. Although he hadn't quite broken past the frigid acolyte level, he was definitely far beyond his previous point. By now, he could emit shocking pulses of frigid chi out of his palm to form something like a projection of a person. That projection was one of the key signs of the frigid acolyte level, a frigid shadow. He also persisted in the cultivation of his undying muscles, making sure to spend time working on it every day. By now, he had completely finished his work on his second toe, and had moved on to his third toe. The patriarchs were right, he thought with a sigh. My cultivation is moving a lot faster here in the Starry Sky Dao polarity sect. Time marched on. 3 months later, the waves caused by the ultra-fasting 8-pill incident had mostly died down. Virtually everyone in Sky City had heard that the whole thing was a scam, and as such, were very leery of any type of fasting aids. Because of that, it was impossible to sell ultra-fasting 8 pills, and even if someone created a new type, no one would trust that it was real, and even fewer people would dare to consume one. The Celestial Sky Society had achieved their goal with minimal effort. In fact, they had even made a bit of profit in the process. Not only had the ultra-fasting 8 pill been done away with once and for all of the blame had been placed onto the head of the now missing apothecary Bai. Of course, the Celestial Sky Society also apologized to everyone who had been injured because of the pills, and used various means to provide compensation. In the end, there were almost no negative ramifications for them. The only thing they regretted was that they hadn't managed to incite the populace to rise up and put Bai Xiaochun to death. However, as far as they were concerned, he was nothing more than a talented apothecary, not someone worth worrying about. It was a war that had been fought without unleashing a single magical technique, and Bai Xiaochun had been thoroughly defeated. That fact left Bai Xiaochun profoundly irritated. Had he lost in magical combat, he wouldn't have cared. But to have been defeated this way left him filled with fury, almost to the point of madness. Never before had he been humiliated in such a fashion, and he had even considering relying on the power of his cultivation base to go stomp the Celestial Sky Society. But then he realized that considering how large of an organization they were, even with his gold core cultivation base, they probably wouldn't be that easy to deal with. Relying on one's cultivation base isn't a true display of skill, he said to himself through gritted teeth. Wherever Bai Xiaochun falls down, that's where he rises back up. I can scheme too, can't I? With that, he took a sip of 100 flower spirit alcohol, and then ate a mouthful of precious jade spirit rice. Those two particular brands of spirit food were relatively expensive, and had been his favorite back in the East District. Thankfully, after arriving at the North District, he still had some left over that he'd bought earlier. Unfortunately, over the past 3 months, he had been forced to watch as his food supply dwindled and the merit points in his identity medallion were slowly eaten away. He hardly had any left now. I guess I was just living too extravagantly before, he thought. He was even starting to regret having spent those 100,000 merit points to become an orange-robed disciple, and also realized that it had been a bit impulsive to buy his crocodile mount. What am I supposed to do? He thought, scowling on the verge of tears. I can't sell ultra-fasting 8 pills anymore. Don't tell me that I'm going to have to go back to living frugally and survive by consuming my own ultra-fasting 8 pills. With that, he ate another mouthful of spirit rice, his anger toward the Celestial Sky Society continuing to grow. Half a month later, he was on the verge of completely running out of spirit food, and he had almost no merit points left. Sadly, he had yet to come up with an idea of how to earn more merit points. Finally, when he was sure that the ultra-fasting 8-pill commotion had died down, he sighed, took a bath in spirit water, and then worked up a quick disguise so that people wouldn't recognize his face. Then he left his spirit abode. I guess I have no choice but to sell my crocodile mount, plus all of those magical items I bought. Probably the jewelry too. Although he was loath to do such a thing, he didn't really have any other choice. After jumping onto his crocodile's back, he thought about how grand he must look with his orange robe. Unfortunately, his bag of holding was virtually completely empty. Thankfully, crocodiles were one of the most common types of mounts in Sky City, so nobody connected the current Bai Xiaochun to the apothecary Bai of the East District. As he proceeded along through the North District, quite a few people looked at him with envy and respect. There were even some orange-robed disciples who looked at him that way. After all, only people with lots of money or power could afford battle beast mounts. That, coupled with the glitter of the magical treasures with which he festooned himself, all made him look very impressive. However, such gazes only made Bai Xiaochun feel worse. After today, he thought dejectedly, nobody is going to look at me like that anymore. Sighing, he decided to parade around the city for a bit longer. It was with great wistfulness that he toured the North District all the way until evening was about to fall. At that point, he gritted his teeth and decided to head to the spirit beast pavilion. Along the way, he passed a certain alley where he happened to notice a familiar cultivator standing there. He was holding a banner in his hand upon which were written 3 characters. Master God Diviner. He was clearly much thinner than he had been when he had parted ways with Bai Xiaochun. His face was waxen and sunken in, his eyes listless. He seemed to be in very bad shape. Few people paid any attention to him as they walked past, and even when he called out to try to drum up business, people simply ignored him. Considering the bleak expression on his face, and his blank stare, it almost looked like his soul had left him. Bai Xiaochun was shocked at his appearance, and immediately felt bad for him. Patting his crocodile mount, he headed over in Master God Diviner's direction. Even before he got near, the crocodile's enormous frame cast a huge shadow over Master God Diviner, who shivered and looked up. The sight that met his eyes was a ferocious 90-meter-long crocodile looming over him. It had armor-like scales that glittered in the evening light, and the breath that escaped its nostrils as it breathed was enough to leave one's mind spinning. Atop the crocodile was Bai Xiaochun, clad in the garments of an orange-robed disciple, looking very grand, surrounded as he was by the glittering light of magical treasures. Master God Diviner was instantly shaken, and his eyes began to shine with unprecedentedly bright light. His experiences during the past few months had left him with a keen understanding regarding people like this. They were like chosen in Sky City, people with tens of thousands of merit points at their disposal, many of whom were very close to becoming yellow-robed disciples. They were the truly powerful figures in the city, people whom Master God Diviner had come to envy and look up to during the past months. As of this moment, his excitement was building at the prospect of getting a client like this. Eyes sparkling, he straightened out his robe and then clasped hands and bowed. "Brother, please wait a moment. I am your humble servant Master God Diviner, and if possible, would like to speak a word with you." Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, then remembered that he was in disguise. Therefore, he pretended to think about the matter for a moment before finally voicing his assent. Master God Diviner was so excited that he was trembling. The truth was that he hadn't even prepared any words to say in a situation like this. The mere fact that someone had agreed to listen to him left his eyes brimming with tears of excitement. Mustering his courage, he told himself, "Master God Diviner, Master God Diviner. You definitely have to please this fellow. Look at how impressive he is. If you make him happy, the merit points will surely come flowing in. Furthermore, you might even be able to convince him to take you on as a permanent diviner." With that, he put a serious expression on his face and then performed a double-handed incantation gesture, then peered at Bai Xiaochun as if to look into his future. Soon, powerful fluctuations began to roll off of him, making him look quite imposing. However, a moment later, his eyes widened, and he began to tremble. No, it can't be. This can't be right. Why are my divinations showing me him? Hold on, let me start over. By this point he was breathing heavily, and a look of complete incredulity could be seen on his face. He quickly performed another double-handed incantation gesture, after which his eyes grew even wider. He almost looked like he had seen a ghost. Yo, a strange expression could be seen on Bai Xiaochun's face as he looked down at Master God Diviner from his position on the crocodile. Obviously, Master God Diviner had deduced his true identity, which was no surprise considering that he did have some skill with divination. After all, he had divined information about Bai Xiaochun back in the Bloodstream sect days, and had always been fairly accurate. "How did you get yourself in such a bad situation, Master Snot?" Bai Xiaochun said. I thought I had it bad, but obviously, you have it way worse than me." Bai Xiaochun, Master God Diviner felt like he had just been struck by lightning. Trembling, he staggered backward. When he had performed the divination just now, what he had seen had been almost impossible to believe. Now that he recognized Bai Xiaochun's voice, he was left reeling in shock. Bai Xiaochun felt quite pleased to see Master God Diviner reacting in such a way. However, he cleared his throat and said, "Keep your voice down." Chapter 386, Why aren't you kowtowing? Master God Diviner stared at Bai Xiaochun, his mind reeling, almost unable to believe how events were unfolding. However, he could believe it, no matter how much he didn't want to. He was currently teetering on the verge of passing out, and all he could think about were the grand aspirations he had harbored upon leaving Bai Xiaochun's spirit abode all those months ago, and also Bai Xiaochun's voice calling out to him as he left. Back then, he had been absolutely certain that he had made the right decision. Now, though, it felt like the world was playing a cruel joke on him. That was especially the case when Bai Xiaochun said, "You have it way worse than me." That caused tears to instantly well up in Master God Diviner's eyes. There Bai Xiaochun was, glittering with the light of magical treasures, his face glowing with a healthy sheen, riding a huge crocodile. He didn't seem to have things bad at all, and it caused Master God Diviner's heart to fill with an intense sensation of injustice. The past few months had been very difficult. Few people believed the divinations he performed, and he had even gotten into some disputes with customers. At first, he hadn't worried about that, but as more and more people got angry with him, he had been forced to flee in terror from the East District. Eventually, he ended up in the North District, where he managed to get back on his feet to some extent. Unfortunately, his income was scanty, and he ended every day feeling hungry. Even worse, he had to pay a merit point protection fee to one of the local gangs to be allowed to have a spot to perform divinations. As he thought about all these things, Master God Diviner smiled bitterly. Realizing that he had to accept reality, he sighed and said, "You really think you have it bad? I think you've actually gained some weight since I saw you last." Bai Xiaochun hopped off of the crocodile, which he then sucked into his spirit beast bag. As he stood there with his orange robe and glittering magical treasures, Master God Diviner couldn't help but gasp inwardly. He well knew that to become an orange robe disciple, one had to pay 100,000 merit points. Plus, a crocodile mount like the one Bai Xiaochun had would cost about the same. After all, Master God Diviner had even enviously passed through the spirit beast pavilion before. "Oh, I have it bad all right," Bai Xiaochun said sadly, "let me tell you. AI. It's been 2 meals now since I've had any precious jade spirit rice, and a whole day since I ran out of 100 flowers spirit alcohol. Plus, I haven't bathed in spirit water for nearly half a day. Look, I even smell a bit sweaty. I can't believe I've gotten so poor." Everything he had just said was true. After all, his life in the East District had been one of luxury and excess. Now that he was in the North District, everything was different, and he couldn't help but feel irritated about that. Master God Diviner's eyes glazed over. The mere words, "precious jade spirit rice," left his heart trembling. Spirit rice like that was something he had only heard about, and had never even been able to smell, let alone taste. It was incredibly expensive, and it had once been his dream to try some. And yet here Bai Xiaochun was saying that he had gone 2 meals without eating any. And then there was 100 flowers spirit alcohol. That sent Master God Diviner even further in the direction of madness. That was the most expensive types of alcohol available in the city, and among his current circle of friends, being able to even drink a mouthful would have made him the subject of envy and jealousy. And yet here Bai Xiaochun was saying that he hadn't had any for a day. That implied that he normally drank it on a daily basis. And when bathing in spirit water was mentioned, tears began to stream down Master God Diviner's face. A mere glance at Bai Xiaochun's skin confirmed that it was glossy and imbued with spiritual energy. That wasn't from his cultivation base, it was caused by the special properties of the spirit water in the Starry Sky Dao polarity sect. Such water left the body with a layer of natural protection that was mysterious and profound, to say the least. However, such protection was definitely a luxury. If one went for 5 days or more without bathing in spirit water, it would naturally fade away. Master God Diviner stared at Bai Xiaochun, eyes glistening miserably. "Junior Patriarch." "Ah, whatever," Bai Xiaochun said, waving his hand in grandly dismissive fashion. "I brought you here with me, didn't I? Therefore, I'm responsible for you. You might have mercilessly dumped me early on, but I'm a magnanimous person. From now on, you stick with me, alright?" Master God Diviner immediately began to tremble. The truth was that he would have stuck with Bai Xiaochun even if Bai Xiaochun tried to drive him away. He had already resolved to swear an oath to follow Bai Xiaochun even if it meant following him into death. "Many thanks, Junior Patriarch." From the excited way he put his banner and table away, it was clear that he felt no attachment to his vendor spot. Hurrying to follow Bai Xiaochun, he said, "So, Junior Patriarch, where are we going?" Bai Xiaochun hesitated for a moment, but then decided to simply tell the truth. "Let's go to the spirit bees." However, before he could finish speaking, 3 beams of light sped toward them. Apparently, these 3 people had noticed Master God Diviner getting ready to leave, and were now attempting to intercept him. 3 cultivators landed in front of Master God Diviner, one of them a middle-aged man with a cultivation base in the Great Circle of Foundation establishment. "Leaving early because you got a new customer, Master God Diviner," he said. "Very well, at least pay your daily fee before leaving." The man's eyes flashed like lightning, and although he wasn't exactly fat, neither was he skinny, and he wore an orange robe just like Bai Xiaochun's. Obviously, he lived a fairly comfortable life here in Sky City. Glancing at Bai Xiaochun, he looked back at Master God Diviner, a false smile stretching out across his face. Master God Diviner's face fell. These 3 were by no means strangers to him, they came from the group that controlled this area. They and a few dozen other cultivators that made up the gang forced all of the vendor stalls in the area to pay a protection fee for the right to do business. Master God Diviner was clearly embarrassed, and didn't want Bai Xiaochun to see him in such a situation. Lowering his voice, he said, "I didn't do any business today. How about tomorrow?" One of the red-robed disciples among the 3 interrupted Master God Diviner and said, "We don't care if you did business or not. The fee is 10 merit points a day. That's what we agreed to, so pay up." Master God Diviner's expression flickered with distress. He knew that Bai Xiaochun, with his gold core cultivation base, wouldn't even bother to spare these 3 a glance. But Master God Diviner still didn't want to lose face in front of Bai Xiaochun. After all, he had been the one to part ways, and if he needed Bai Xiaochun's help in this situation, it would be far too embarrassing. Gritting his teeth, forced a smile onto his face and prepared to pull out his identity medallion. But then, the man in the orange robe said, now that you have such a high-class customer, Master God Diviner, I'm afraid the 10 merit point fee won't be enough. We need you to pay for next month in advance. Rage immediately began to flicker in Master God Diviner's eyes. You people, now, hold that temper of yours. If you don't have enough, I'm sure this new customer of yours wouldn't mind giving you an advance on your services. The orange-robed cultivator looked at Bai Xiaochun with a false smile, his eyes lingering on his numerous glowing magical treasures. Despite his greed, though, he didn't dare to push things too far. He could tell that Bai Xiaochun most likely had an impressive background. However, trying to get a few hundred merit points out of him wouldn't be too excessive. Junior Patriarch, Master God Diviner said hesitantly. However, Bai Xiaochun waved his hand to cut him off. Eyes shining brightly, he looked over at the orange-robed cultivator. Well, isn't this interesting? I can't believe I never thought of this myself. The look in Bai Xiaochun's eyes left the orange-robed disciple feeling very unsettled, and the two red-robed disciples suddenly had very serious expressions on their faces. You dare to try to take my money with a foundation establishment cultivation base? Bai Xiaochun said, I'm afraid things don't work like that. With that, he threw his head back and began to laugh loudly. The three cultivators instantly realized something was wrong, and were just getting ready to attack Bai Xiaochun when he suddenly waved his hand, causing a gale force wind to spring up. Rumbling sounds filled the air, and blood sprayed out of the mouths of the three cultivators as they were sent tumbling backward 30 meters. Core formation. Before the three of them could stop hurtling through the air, Bai Xiaochun made a grasping motion, turning the wind into bonds that wrapped around them and pulled them toward him. I have the feeling you people are in need of a good leader. What do you think? Join me, and we can rule everything under heaven. Bai Xiaochun was being very sincere, and in his mind, the grandiose words he had just spoken should definitely cause the three men to drop to their knees and kowtow. The three of them were trembling, and appeared to be on the verge of weeping. Even Master God Diviner was a bit taken aback. Don't worry, with me around, nothing bad will happen to you. Come, lead the way to your headquarters so I can meet all the other fellow Daos in your group. As of this point, he had completely abandoned his plan to sell his crocodile mount. These three cultivators had unwittingly opened a door that Bai Xiaochun had never imagined even existed. All of a sudden, he could almost see all the merit points that were waiting for him.